God has spoken to me again right now. The Lord took me into a hospital in Asia. There's a very big distress there. You see a lot of people swarming into the hospital. I see the lack of equipment. Now there's no equipment. The doctors are running up and down, and many people flooding into the hospital. The Lord took me to Asia, and I see a lot of people rushing into the hospital, being rushed with the procedure being done on somebody, and then there is testing. So somebody told me, well, he makes one of the doctors there to speak with me, and he says, "We don't have equipment. What we do, we take this, and they will take a little and put on the culture to see." So there is going to be a big distress that is going to come into Asia, a big disease. Distress of disease is coming. There will be a disease emergency in Asia. That distress will be like none other, a distress that has not been seen. This kind of distress, like God has shown me just a few minutes ago when He took me to Asia, will develop on this earth, will drop on this planet Earth.
Tonight there's growing concern about a new and rare pneumonia-like virus that has caused at least 2 deaths and has spread from China to other countries in Asia.
Fears about the spread of a deadly new virus grow. A doctor at the hospital in Wuhan, where this all began, has been speaking to the BBC and said the virus is now spreading at an alarming rate. The hospitals have been flooding with thousands of patients who wait hours to see a doctor. You can imagine their panic.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We are continuing to monitor the outbreak of the mysterious new coronavirus tonight. The number of confirmed cases in China keeps soaring nearly a week into the biggest quarantine in history.
Chinese authorities are under pressure to control the spread of a new deadly disease.
Concern is growing over a possible outbreak of a new SARS-like virus. The flu-like mystery illness reported in China.
A new virus with no known treatment or vaccine.
It came without warning, and it spreads like wildfire. But until today, its origins remain a mystery. It was first discovered in Wuhan, the capital city of China's Hubei province, late last year. China alerted the World Health Organization of a mysterious virus outbreak in Wuhan.
The Lord took me into a hospital. There's a very big distress there. You see a lot of people swarming into the hospital. The doctors are running up and down, and many people flooding into the hospital. And I see a lot of people rushing into the hospital, being rushed.
Wuhan's hospitals are struggling to cope, and medical staff are under intolerable pressure.
This is Janet Shamlian in Houston, where hospitals are buckling under a flood of new coronavirus cases.
Healthcare systems everywhere have been overwhelmed with coronavirus patients.
We can't cope with a big spike, we just can't. We're planning for many more patients, so all our theatres to be full of COVID patients and possibly beyond. It is, none of us have ever seen anything like this.
We have a full ICU. We have every patient in here on a ventilator. Everybody has coronavirus.
Vedi se nella sala d'attesa del 3 c'è posto. Allora, tra un'ora un posto si libera in ginecologia, però tra un'ora perché hanno fatto un decesso e quindi aspettano la polizia. Sì, Covid. Ormai...
The hospitals are full and the truly sick keep on arriving. The only sound is the urgent movement of the medical teams and the machines keeping the patients alive.
Ci stiamo facendo da un mese praticamente.
Rispetto ad un altro più anziano, vedo i loro visi ormai davvero provati e quasi inespressivi.
A shocker from Mumbai. A video posted on Twitter by BJP MLA Nitesh Rane shows coronavirus patients in a hospital ward lying next to corpses wrapped in body bags. This horrifying clip is from Sion Hospital, which is run by the city's municipal corporation. At least 7 bodies are seen in the ward as patients are being treated in adjoining beds. Some patients have family members attending to them, apparently ignoring bodies right behind them.
A doctor at the hospital in Wuhan, where this all began, has been speaking to the BBC and said the virus is now spreading at an alarming rate. The hospitals have been flooding with thousands of patients who wait hours to see a doctor. You can imagine their panic.
This is an ABC News special report.
Italy's health service, one of the best in the world, is overwhelmed.
Here in Lombardy, it's overwhelming. These patients are critically ill. In all probability, they won't make it. They turn the patients over to relieve the pressure on the lungs. Without doubt, she wouldn't survive.
In Bergamo, the worst-hit town in northern Italy, they talk of a whole generation being wiped out. The healthcare system simply wasn't prepared for this.
There can be no funerals in Italy, only names in the paper. Pages and pages of obituaries for those claimed by corona. The dead laid to rest unaccompanied, their mourning families, some of them millions, still stuck at home.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Every corridor, every corner, every ward.
Bring the juice. Bring the juice.
Every inch of Brookdale Hospital Medical Center in Brooklyn now inundated with those suffering from COVID-19.
Hospitals are under siege.
All the patients in this room, all the feet that you see, they all have COVID.
The Lord took me into a hospital. There's a very big distress there. You see a lot of people swarming into the hospital. I see the lack of equipment now. There is no equipment. The doctors are running up and down. Well, he makes one of the doctors there to speak with me, and he says, "We don't have equipment."
Well, healthcare workers in Italy facing some excruciating decisions about allocating life-saving treatment because they are being so overwhelmed by COVID-19 cases, and they are begging for help tonight for equipment, for personnel.
No more gowns in the whole hospital, no more masks. She said they had no choice but to reuse the masks.
GP Mukesh Haikerwal is almost out of gowns and masks at his Melbourne clinic, where he's been testing patients for coronavirus in the car park. He's tried ordering more stock from his normal supplier, but they're out too.
We are at the front line as general practitioners in this space. We've had no equipment. That's all being saved for the hospitals. Yet we are expected to keep people out of hospitals.
Hospitals in Canada are burning through masks, gowns, and gloves in the fight against COVID-19, and there are fears of shortages.
We are in desperate need of both nurses and physicians, together with ventilators and dispositives for protection.
Hospital resources are overwhelmed, and there are simply not enough ventilators to go around.
We know that doctors in places like Italy and New York have had to make some heartbreaking decisions about who lives and who dies.
This is an NBC News special report.
The global coronavirus outbreak has pushed the U.S. healthcare system to its brink. Hospitals are already running out of basic supplies like masks, eye gear, gowns, and ventilators.
Where you have a problem with ventilators, we're working very hard trying to find. Nobody in their wildest dreams would have ever thought that we need tens of thousands of ventilators. This is something that's very unique to what happened.
New York Governor Andrew Cuomo told the country to sit up and pay attention to New York.
Where we are today, you will be in 3 weeks or 4 weeks. We are your future.
With nearly 1 out of 4 New York coronavirus patients in intensive care, Cuomo outlined a desperate need: 40,000 more ICU beds and 30,000 ventilators.
Where are they? Where are the ventilators? FEMA says we're sending 400 ventilators. Really? What am I going to do with 400 ventilators when I need 30,000? You pick the 26,000 people who are going to die because you only sent 400 ventilators.
In Teaneck, New Jersey, the crisis is just as dire.
It's incredible, and it hits so fast.
Dr. Serge Seger with Holy Name Medical Center says his entire hospital has just 10 ventilators left, and they're running dangerously low on supplies.
In the UK, Health Minister Matt Hancock has acknowledged that the existing stock of 5,000 ventilators is inadequate.
Some of the biggest ventilator manufacturers like Medtronic plc, Philips, Drägerwerk AG, and Getinge are racing to ramp up production. Philips has said that the company is looking to double the ventilators that it makes per week from 1,000 to 2,000. The UK government has turned to a wartime solution, asking manufacturers like vacuum company Dyson and luxury car maker Rolls-Royce to produce essential equipment. President Trump has also encouraged automakers to aid in the production of ventilators.
Across the globe, the coronavirus has overwhelmed even the most advanced healthcare systems. Many patients in a critical condition have to be placed on a ventilator. Right now, there's a critical global shortage.
Life-saving ventilators, assembled and packed in the hundreds. Medical supplies desperately needed in the fight against the coronavirus pandemic.
Usually there's not much demand for ventilators worldwide, but nobody expected this virus outbreak. It put a lot of pressure on ventilator makers.
Supplies made in China have also been included in emergency aid packages sent by Beijing to more than 80 countries in need.
This is a welcome sight, a hospital ship sailing to the rescue. Here's Lisa Guerrero.
The U.S. Navy hospital ship Mercy is pulling into the port behind me here in San Pedro, California. It has 1,000 much-needed hospital beds, 900 medical personnel, and that is really going to help relieve the pressure on L.A. area hospitals during this pandemic.
A sister ship, Comfort, is sailing to New York City. And two of the swankiest hotels in Manhattan, the St. Regis and the New York Palace, are being converted into makeshift hospital.
The 10 intensive care beds at this field hospital are already full. Patients unconscious and kept alive by machines.
There are enough ventilators to treat the sickest patients, but they're running out of the drugs needed to sedate them while they fit the breathing apparatus. There's just 3 weeks left, then they don't think they'll be able to get any more.
Staff fear that they will soon be overwhelmed.
Sim, os casos estão aumentando a todo momento, né? Cada dia os casos estão se tornando uma realidade assustadora, né? E a gente preocupa, né? E o medo, o nosso medo é que aconteça colapso.
Rapid response to room 315, rapid response to room 315, rapid response to room 315.
This is Hudson Regional Hospital, situated in the middle of one of the hardest hit areas during the peak of the pandemic.
Call move to room 315, call move to room 315.
The hospital morgue is so overwhelmed, they had to bring in a freezer truck to store all of the bodies.
This is the trailer where they're currently placing the deceased patients.
Well, next one of the doctors there to speak with me, and he says, "We don't have equipment. What we do, we take this, and they will take a little and put on the culture to see a big disease, the stress of disease is coming."
Scientists around the world are now racing to find a vaccine and a cure for the coronavirus. Governments are pledging millions of dollars of taxpayers' money for research in both public and private firms.
Scientists racing to find a vaccine.
So the minute we made the diagnosis of the first case in Australia, we knew how significant that was, and we knew that we wanted to culture the virus.
In a major breakthrough, Australian scientists become the first outside China to isolate the virus in a laboratory. CSIRO's scientists begin growing the virus in their highest security laboratory, reserved for the most deadly pathogens.
The most important thing that we're doing at the moment is growing the virus to produce more of it so that we can understand more about the characteristics of this virus and also how it behaves in our biological model.
A coronavirus vaccine is the holy grail. Scientists around the world are working at breakneck speed to make one. Here's Angela Cox to explain how they're tracking.
Mel, right now there are more than 100 different groups working on a vaccine. About half a dozen are already doing clinical trials.
President Trump says he's optimistic about some potential treatments for the novel coronavirus. In particular, a malaria drug called chloroquine.
You know, this has been something that's been around for many years. It's been phenomenal, strong, powerful drug for malaria. But we think it might work on this, based on evidence, based on very strong evidence.
It's true, the medication has been around for more than 80 years and has a few side effects, including nausea and mood changes, as well as possible interactions with other drugs. Now, enthusiasm for the possibility of treating the novel coronavirus largely centers on one study out of France, which used a derivative of chloroquine used with an antibiotic commonly known as the Z-Pak. The study was small, and the patients were followed for only 6 days.
For weeks, he's been touting the use of an anti-malaria drug to treat cases of COVID-19. Now a vindication for Professor Didier Raoult, the head of a university hospital institute in Marseille. The French government has officially sanctioned the prescription of chloroquine to treat the virus.
In late January 2020, Chinese scientists in Shanghai released the fully sequenced genome of the novel coronavirus that was wreaking havoc in Hubei province. The pressure to develop a coronavirus vaccine grows each day as the number of infected people rises and the death toll climbs even higher.
Corona means crown in Latin, named because of the spikes on the virus's outer coat. Scientists are at war with COVID-19. Dozens of laboratories are now battlegrounds in the race for a vaccine. Here at Oxford University, volunteers' blood samples are prepared for testing. No single company or laboratory can do this alone. It requires international effort and resources. The world's best brains have been mobilized.
The Lord has spoken to me again right now. There will be a disease emergency, a distress that has not been seen. This kind of distress, like God has shown me just a few minutes ago when He took me to Asia, will develop on this earth, will throb on this planet Earth.
This is CNN Breaking News.
First, we have an update on the spread of the deadly coronavirus. Now, a short time ago, the World Health Organization declared the outbreak an international public health emergency. The organization's Director General explains why they've taken this step.
The main reason for this declaration is not because of what is happening in China. Our greatest concern is the potential for the virus to spread in other countries.
This is an NBC News special report.
Coronavirus has hit countries around the world, sparking public health emergencies in places as different from one another as Iran, Italy, China, and the United States.
To unleash the full power of the federal government in this effort today, I am officially declaring a national emergency.
The Lord has spoken to me again right now. There will be a disease emergency, a distress that has not been seen. This kind of distress, like God has shown me just a few minutes ago, will develop on this earth, will throb on this planet Earth.
This is CNN Breaking News.
First, we have an update on the spread of the deadly coronavirus. Now, a short time ago, the World Health Organization declared the outbreak an international public health emergency. The organization's Director General explains why they've taken this step.
The main reason for this declaration is not because of what is happening in China. Our greatest concern is the potential for the virus to spread in other countries.
This is an NBC News special report.
Coronavirus has hit countries around the world, sparking public health emergencies in places as different from one another as Iran, Italy, China, and the United States.
To unleash the full power of the federal government in this effort today, I am officially declaring a national emergency.
The Lord has spoken to me again right now. There will be a disease emergency in Asia, a distress that has not been seen. This kind of distress, like God has shown me just a few minutes ago when He took me to Asia, will develop on this earth, will throb on this planet Earth.
coronavirus outbreak sparked a global emergency.
The outbreak of the coronavirus in China has finally been declared a global health emergency after a rapid escalation in the number of infections during the past week.
All right, we have breaking news now. Let's get to it. It has to do with COVID-19. And the World Health Organization has just declared coronavirus. It is a global pandemic at this point.
It feels like this week was when it changed for Britain. Just 7 days ago, life was almost normal. Now, many are wondering when life on these islands will be normal again.
We're going to interrupt things here for a second because we've received breaking news from the UK where British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has been moved to intensive care. We talked earlier in our coverage about his hospitalization because of coronavirus.
The CDC tonight says Europe is the new epicenter of the epidemic, with 70% of new cases originating here. And countries are falling like dominoes, one shutting down after another. Ireland now closing schools. The Irish Prime Minister today with President Trump.
We need to do this for a couple of weeks to make sure the virus doesn't spread.
Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announcing he will self-isolate after his wife got flu symptoms after a trip to the UK.
And in Germany, Chancellor Angela Merkel now in isolation after her personal doctor, who she saw Friday, tested positive.
To that breaking news from Brazil, the president, Jair Bolsonaro, says that he has tested positive for coronavirus. He says he began feeling unwell on Sunday, had a fever and was suffering some pain. He then took a test and that was confirmed positive. Mr. Bolsonaro has long played down the danger of COVID-19, saying it's like a little flu. His country is the epicenter of the pandemic in Latin America, with more than 1.6 million infections.
E ele acabou de dar positivo. Deu positivo.
He announced today on TV that he's tested positive for the coronavirus, that Brazil has one of the most deadly COVID-19 outbreaks in the world, with 65,000 deaths and over 1.6 million infections, second only to the United States.
Honduran President Juan Orlando Hernandez says he has tested positive for coronavirus.
Over the weekend I started to feel bad, and today they have diagnosed me with being infected with COVID-19, Hernandez said in a televised presidential address on Tuesday night.
The president added that he had mild symptoms and was receiving treatment. He said he would continue to carry out his presidential duties while in isolation and under observation.
He is the first president in Latin America to have tested positive for the virus.
Hernandez's wife, First Lady Ana Garcia de Hernandez, and two presidential aides have also tested positive for the disease.
Hernandez said his wife was asymptomatic at present. The First Lady is self-isolating following her diagnosis. Daily life has been disrupted, and now a wave of school closures. And many employees are being told to work from home, including everyone at Apple headquarters in Cupertino, California, and Microsoft.
This is Al Jazeera.
And Iran has temporarily freed about 85,000 prisoners in response to the pandemic. Last week, the UN asked Tehran to release them to help stem the spread of the virus.
The US remains the epicenter of the pandemic. It now has close to 3 million confirmed cases,
and more than 52,000 new infections were reported just on Sunday. Florida is one area of concern. The infection rate is escalating, and total infections are now past 200,000. 11,000 of them were reported on Sunday. So is Texas. Cases there have now passed 200,000, and more than 8,000 people were hospitalized on Sunday. According to local media, hospitals may reach capacity within 2 weeks. Next, further west onto Arizona. Infections there are rising rapidly. They've almost reached 100,000. Gyms, bars and cinemas have all been closed until the end of the month, and more than 5,000 people were admitted to hospital on Sunday. There are also concerns in Arizona. Hospitals may reach their limits. Next, we turn to India. It now has close to 700,000 confirmed cases. That's the third highest total after America and Brazil. It's recorded more than 24,000 new infections just in the last 24 hours, and its death toll is over 19,000.
Undertakers dressed for medical battle. Their white protective suits a striking contrast to this red earth. Another soul laid to rest in the Villa Formosa cemetery in Sao Paulo. It's a disturbing ritual repeated up to 60 times a day, proof that COVID-19 is now rampant in Brazil's largest city. Families have little time to say goodbye. They tend hastily dug graves, uncertain who or where it will strike next. But hundreds of new graves are now needed to take the mounting COVID casualties in a city of 20 million.
Everywhere you look in this cemetery, there's row upon row of freshly dug graves. Confirmation that Brazil now has the highest daily death rate of any country in the world, and perhaps even more frightening, one of the lowest testing rates, and no planned way of how they're going to get out of this pandemic.
Brazil's hospitals are overflowing with people who are fighting for their lives. Doctors at a Sao Paulo field hospital work as fast as possible to intubate a 43-year-old man whose oxygen levels are critical.
Now it is Latin America's turn to face the pain of the COVID-19 storm that spread west across the globe. In Brazil, the health service is ill-prepared. In truth, it's already overwhelmed. They know this.
Corpses wrapped in plastic and left on the sidewalk in Ecuador. Trucks overloaded, carrying coffins on racks bolted on the side of the trailer. Authorities are handling the bodies of coronavirus victims in Guayaquil, the epicenter of the outbreak.
The Lord has come out
Bwana ametoka
with a storm
akiwa na dhoruba
to strike the earth
kuigonga dunia
for their iniquity,
kwa ajili ya udhalimu wao,
for their sin,
kwa ajili ya dhambi yao,
for their blackmail,
kwa ajili ya
for their blasphemy,
kwa ajili ya makufuru yao,
abomination, immorality,
usherati.
Hallelujah,
hallelujah, kutawaka
on that day.
Katika siku hiyo.
The cloud of God is coming from heaven to visit the earth. So this appertains to New Zealand, the United States of America, Europe, everywhere. It's coming to earth. The cloud of God is coming. The cloud of God is coming. Europe, Finland, Spain, United States, South America, Concepcion, Chile, all the way to Brisbane, Canberra, to Gisborne, New Zealand, the end of the earth. South Korea, Incheon, Boryong, Busan, Beijing, Shanghai, Fushan. The Lord is coming to town. And yet the Lord is so patient. He gives you time, blessed people, between the announcement today and then, that you may not be afflicted by his coming.
So there is going to be a big distress that is going to come into Asia. A big disease, distress of disease is coming. That distress will be like none other, a distress that has not been seen. This kind of distress, like God has shown me just a few minutes ago when he took me to Asia, will develop on this earth, will throb on this planet Earth.
Right now, the future's not looking good. The world economy is expected to grow at its slowest rate. That means less wealth and fewer jobs.
This is CNN Breaking News.
In the meantime, the coronavirus pandemic has contributed to a major stock market sell-off, and today we saw history and high anxiety for investors here in the US. The Dow Jones plunged more than 2,000 points. That is how the Dow Jones ended the day. It is the biggest drop in a single day ever, so you're witnessing history being made here, and it was the biggest percentage loss since way back in 2008.
This is Nightline.
The rapid spread of the virus also impacting the global economy, now shut down by the outbreak.
The growing coronavirus outbreak is causing chaos in global financial markets. It's freezing supply chains. It's causing companies all over the world to create work-from-home plans and ban business travel.
The U.S. jobs market is in a crisis unlike any other in history. More than 40 million Americans are out of work as entire industries have frozen during the coronavirus pandemic. The unemployment rate has skyrocketed to its highest level since the Great Depression. Americans have taken to the streets to protest racial and economic inequality.
This is the worst economic crisis to rack this country since the Great Depression of the 1930s, and reveals just how close America is to financial hardship.
It's creating a cascading threat to the travel industry and the millions of people who depend on it.
If there's nobody traveling on planes, there's nobody staying in hotels. If no one's staying in hotels, no one's going to restaurants, no one's using taxi cabs, Ubers, chauffeured cars, or anything else. Everything kind of stops, and that's the problem.
The cruise industry has been particularly hard hit. Last month, thousands of people were confined on board 2 cruise ships amid fears of spreading the virus.
This kind of distress, like God has shown me just a few minutes ago when He took me to Asia, will develop on this earth, will throb on this planet Earth.
The world is experiencing unprecedented events right now as the coronavirus pandemic affects the lives of millions of people. Governments are putting cities into lockdown, and they are urging everyone to avoid public spaces and to work from home.
The world's largest COVID-19 lockdown is now in effect for India's more than 1.3 billion people. The Indian Prime Minister giving just 4 hours notice until the lockdown came into effect overnight. Police barricaded roads to restrict movement. The government had already shut down all air and train travel, businesses and schools.
This is Madrid, one of the most vibrant cities in the world, now utterly subdued. Spain has told its people to stay at home.
I want to begin with some breaking news out of Italy. All of Italy is now on lockdown. All of Italy is now on lockdown over the coronavirus. Italy's Prime Minister making the announcement at a news conference.
Tonight, 2.5 million residents in one Korean city ordered to stay indoors after a woman who authorities called a super spreader infected dozens in her own church.
This is an NBC News special report.
Tonight, as millions of Americans search for comfort, places of worship are taking unprecedented steps. The church is suspending all public gatherings worldwide. From Chicago to Detroit, mosques are canceling Friday prayers. In New York and New Jersey, some synagogues are doing the same for Shabbat services. In Washington, D.C., Episcopal churches, including the National Cathedral, are shutting down.
This breaking news, Rome's Catholic churches have now been ordered to close, all of them, because of the coronavirus. This is a move believed to be unprecedented in modern time.
The Lord took me to Asia, and I see a lot of people rushing into the hospital, being rushed with the procedure being done on somebody. and then there is testing. So somebody told me, well, he makes one of the doctors there to speak with me, and he says, we don't have equipment. What we do, we take this, and they will take a little and put on the culture to see. A big disease, the stress of disease is coming.
This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Mariam Namazi. Scientists around the world are now racing to find a vaccine and a cure for the coronavirus. Governments are pledging millions of dollars of taxpayers' money for research in both public and private firms.
Scientists racing to find a vaccine.
So the minute we made the diagnosis of the first case in Australia, we knew how significant that was, and we knew that we wanted to culture the virus.
In a major breakthrough, Australian scientists become the first outside China to isolate the virus in a laboratory. CSIRO's scientists begin growing the virus in their highest security laboratory, reserved for the most deadly pathogens.
The most important thing that we're doing at the moment is growing the virus to produce more of it so that we can understand more about the characteristics of this virus and also how it behaves in our biological model.
In late January 2020, Chinese scientists in Shanghai released the fully sequenced genome of the novel coronavirus that was wreaking havoc in Hubei province. The pressure to develop a coronavirus vaccine grows each day as the number of infected people rises and the death toll climbs even higher.
Corona means crown in Latin, named because of the spikes on the virus's outer coat. Scientists are at war with COVID-19. Dozens of laboratories are now battlegrounds in the race for a vaccine. Here at Oxford University, volunteers' blood samples are prepared for testing. No single company or laboratory can do this alone. It requires international effort and resources. The world's best brains have been mobilized.
The Lord has come out
Bwana ametoka
with a storm
akiwa na dhoruba
to strike the earth
kuigonga dunia
for their iniquity,
kwa ajili ya udhalimu wao,
for their sin,
kwa ajili ya dhambi yao,
for their blackmail,
kwa ajili ya
for their blasphemy,
kwa ajili ya makufuru yao,
abomination, immorality,
usherati.
Hallelujah,
hallelujah,
kutawaka
kutawaka
on that day.
Katika siku hiyo.